Hello there in Na'ala land. We begin in Hashem Parshat Bo, right? Everyone is just very excited. Remember Bo from elementary school. There's so many mitzvos, the beginning of our people, the culmination of the 10 plagues. And this year is Lila Nishmas Rochalea Bas Chaim Tzvi Shalom. So first our summary of the Parsha, which is our new methodology, and then we'll go through some of the psukim and the mitzvot of the Parsha. After Moshe warned Paro that on the following day a plague of locusts would destroy Egyptian crops, so all of Pharaoh's officers urged him to let the Bnei Yisrael depart. However, Moshe and Aaron insisted that the women, children, and flocks of the Israelites also be allowed to leave. And as a result, they were driven from Pharaoh's presence. The very next day, Moshe extended his rod, and an east wind carried into Egypt a swarm of locusts, which devoured the country's vegetation. After witnessing this disaster, Pharaoh admitted his error and begged Moshe and Aaron to pray for the removal of the plague. They complied, and a strong west wind drove the locust into the Red Sea. However, once again Pharaoh reverted to his stubbornly negative attitude. Moshe then brought about the next plague upon the Egyptians, a total darkness, which he sent upon the Egyptians for 3 terrifying days, in which they were unable to move about. Only the Bnei Yisrael were granted light within their dwellings. The resulting nightmarish chaos proved too much for Pharaoh to cope with, and now he offers for all Bnei Yisrael, the men, the women, and the children, to leave, provided the flocks and herds were left behind, as surety that the Bnei Yisrael would return. And here all of a sudden Pharaoh is giving conditions. One plague after another plague after another plague, and he said, no, I'll tell you exactly what condition you can leave. So Moshe, of course, rejects this stipulation, and Pharaoh forbade him to appear again in the royal presence. Moshe replied that there would be one final devastating plague, the one would cost all Egyptian firstborn their lives, and then depart for the very last time. God informs Moshe that the redemption was near, and that henceforth the year would begin with the month of the deliverance of Nisan. On the 10th day of this month, each head of a household was to set aside an unblemished male lamb to be kept until the evening of the 14th day, when it would be sacrificed. Some of its blood would then be smeared on the lintel and on the doorposts of the house as a sign that the inhabitants were Bnei Yisrael. That night the meat of the sacrifice was to be eaten when roasted with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. Any of it remaining in the morning was to be burnt. Furthermore, it was to be consumed in haste, and participants were prepared to start on a journey. That night would be the very night that God is going to smite all the firstborn in Mitzrayim, and would spare those in houses sprinkled with the lamb's blood. In the future, this festival was to be observed annually as Pesach, a permanent reminder of the deliverance from Egypt. Only unleavened bread was to be eaten for 7 days, and the 1st and 7th day of the festival were to be observed as days of holy assembly, when all work would be forbidden. The sacrifice of the Pesach offering was to be observed in the Canaan after the conquest, and its significance was to be explained to the future generations. At midnight exactly, albeit the verse says it was almost midnight, and we'll get to that when we get to it, God smote all the Egyptian firstborn, both man and animal. Pharaoh and his fellow Egyptians rose in the middle of the night to bitterly lament their loss. They then asked that the Bnei Yisrael leave, as God had predicted, speaking not from a position of power, but from one of subjugation. The Bnei Yisrael left in such haste that their leavened dough had no time to rise. And ever since, as a commemoration, the Jewish people eat unleavened bread, matzah, on Pesach. There were 600,000 men who began the journey, and they brought with them their wives and their children. They also carried a large supply of gold and silver, which the Egyptians had given them. The Jews were ordered to bring a korban Pesach every year on the 14th day of Nisan, and the Jews were commanded to redeem their firstborn child in all future generations, and to wear tefillin for a sign upon your hand and for a memorial between your eyes, to remind them of their salvation from Mitzrayim. That's our summary. We begin the Parsha. And this is the climax. This is the climax of the plagues, which begins now in the beginning of our Parsha, which is in the 10th chapter of Shmos. And Moshe's climax is impending now. The last 3 plagues to sanctify the new moon, which is the beginning of course, the cylindrical cycle, right? As my Rabbi Bamser, my Mechutin, says that Jews are lunatics. They go according to the lunar cycle. The laws of Pesach, and the sanctification of the firstborn are about to come in quick succession. And so Pharaoh's resistance is going to be completely destroyed. He's going to dash the streets seeking Moshe and Aaron, urging his erstwhile slaves to leave the land in bondage. Get out of here. We can't take this as soon as possible. So now we have a new element with the first plague of our Parsha, which is the locust. He wants to make a mockery out of Egypt. So this is going to end Pharaoh's haughty presumption, who is God, I don't know who he is. Implies that now Pharaoh had resisted any evidence of divine origin of plagues, but it seems that even the faith of the Jews, strong as it may have been, was still not perfect. It's not going to happen till the splitting of Egypt, and so all Bnei Israel realizes that